Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast. My name is Andy Spiteri, and as always, joined by Dakota Lasky. Dak, how you doing today?
I'm tired, man. I'm good, but pretty tired after my run through Prime yesterday. It was a lot of fun, but I'm doing great and trying to enjoy my Memorial Day weekend as much as I can. So hope you're doing well as well.
Yeah, I can't complain. We got some nice weather here, and I picked up the last Metroid game I need for my collection, which is Metroid Prime Pinball.
Yes.
So pretty good weekend all in all. Let's talk
diamond in
about
the
it
rough,
though.
man.
You know what? I played a level and it was pretty cool. Although I'm pretty sure I don't know what to do and I'm not very good at pinball. So
It's pinball, man. And you just hit the ball up. It's easy. You'll figure it out. I believe in you.
all right, I want to talk about what you just said. That you're a little bit tired. I was a little bit tired because I stayed up and watched you play Metroid Prime last night, and I ducked out after the Omega Pirate, and you kept on going there. Tell everybody where they can watch you and what you're doing on Twitch right now.
Yeah, so of course, many of you know I'm a big Metroid Prime fan specifically, and a big FPS, PC player as well. So I got my hands on Dolphin, I got my hands on Metroid Prime Trilogy, and I got my hands on Prime Hack, which allows you to play the Metroid Prime Trilogy with true mouse and keyboard, PC FPS controls. The reticle is synced to the camera. You're looking around. It doesn't have, the Wii remote reticle moving around the camera, desynced from it. You don't have the original Prime 1 or 2 tank controls. You have true PC mouse and keyboard controls. And it was honestly, it was the best way to play Metroid Prime, and I'm assuming 2 and 3 when I eventually get to those, ever. It's, so good, amazing. It took me not a long time to figure it out, to put it all together. And I did a playthrough with those controls on my Twitch channel yesterday from I don't know, I want to say 3 p.m. Eastern to 4:30 in the morning, because I figured I'm just going to play the whole game. And I also, was trying to take the game in a little bit, trying to relive some moments and take it a little slow. I backtracked a lot. I forgot where things were. I had to go circle around for all the artifacts. So it took me longer than I expected, but it was a lot of fun. I did it on twitch.tv/therapture_. And I do intend on playing Prime 2 and 3 eventually. Probably not, maybe next weekend or something like that. I need some sleep because, as I said, I was up to 4:30 in the morning. I figured I was playing it so long I'd beat the game. And it took me a lot longer than I expected. And by the time you came around, I was like, well, I got to finish it. I've come this far. And you ducked out just before the ending, but it was totally worth it. It was a lot of fun, and it was the most fun I've ever had playing a Metroid game. And not just Metroid Prime, but Metroid in general. So, yeah, highly recommend it. And it was great, and I can't wait to play Prime 2 and 3.
Yep, I showed up, and yeah, I think the fatigue was getting to you, but by God, you powered through, and it was a good time I had watching you fight some pirates and traverse the Phazon mines. A little bit of anxiety there because you spam missiles, but nothing that we can't fix in the next game. So yeah, next time that Dak goes up on Twitch, we'll let you know in the Metroid Database Discord server where we also have a channel of our own. So yeah, you guys can come and hang out with us and watch Dak play some Metroid. As he says, it was intended to play. I'm not sold on this mouse and keyboard business yet.
Oh my God.
He likes it.
We have other things to talk about today, but I could spend multiple episodes talking about how great it was. It truly is the best way to play the game. I can't recommend it more. It was so good. I'm fumbling over my words because I had so much fun, and that's why I played it all night, because I was like, wow, this is actually really good. I don't want to play anything else. This is how the game should have been released. That's how the game was meant to be played 100%. Can't convince me otherwise. That's for another day.
Oh, it's for another day, and actually, you're right. We have a lot to talk about today. We've got some rumors, and of course, we're finally getting to Mapping Metroid. But first, I did want to let everybody know, kind of at the top of the show here, I'm going to try and do a better job letting you guys know what's coming in the future. So here is our upcoming slate of shows, barring any major announcements or news, of course. If those happened, those will always take priority. But as of right now, today, Of course, you are going to get Phendrana Drifts, a Mapping Metroid, the first in what we hope is going to be kind of a recurring series that we'll touch on every couple of weeks where we analyze an area. The week after that, I think Dak and I are going to go to war about Metroid Prime Hunters, the concept, should it be brought back? What is that game all about? If you saw us going at it in Discord, I think you're gonna love us going at it for this show. So that's coming up. That's coming up on the 2nd of June. On the 9th of June, we are doing an Inspired by Metroid episode, which is another thing that we hope to do kind of semi-frequently here on the show, and that's kind of highlight the really great Metroidvania games that have clearly taken some inspiration from Metroid. And we're going to start it off with Axiom Verge. So I'm in the middle of playing through that, just kind of refreshing myself. And I'm really looking forward to that. And then on the 16th, maybe one of our most anticipated episodes ever, Metroid Prime Federation Force. We're going to talk the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that is coming up all in the next couple weeks. I'm pretty excited about every one of those, actually. But yeah, man, what a run of shows it's going to be.
You know, it's funny you said that the Hunters episode's going to be a war, because it's usually not a war if there's a guaranteed winner, right? And since we all know who's going to be winning that one, I wouldn't put it that way. And the Federation, you know how bad I really want to talk about Other M. A Federation Force, it didn't do anybody wrong, you know? It's almost like, I don't want to pick on it, but I am looking forward to talking about it.
We're going to have to pick on it.
We're going to have to pick on it
a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit, you know, just a little bit.
Also, don't put yourself down like that, Dak. People might think you have a point or two in Hunters.
Bro.
But, of course.
1v1 me, Harvester, let's go, all right? I got my DS right here. I'll break it out. I don't care. See, that's the thing. Y'all are scared, y'all Metroid fans. You're up against AI opponents all the time, but when it's one-on-one against someone on the battlefield with just missiles, and that's it. You got a little bit of ammunition and no cover. That's when the real, rubber meets the road there, Andy. I can't wait.
I think that's going to be a war. But we should talk about the rumor that has been circulating the internet today, Dak.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently and allegedly, we had a couple people tweet us that the Metroid Prime Trilogy is going to come out on June the 19th. We've had Nintendo Everything cover it. Stealth has been talking about it. So, it seems like there's some fire behind here. Off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I forget which retailer basically updated their release schedule. But, give me your 2 cents on this if you think that it's possible or not, Dak, because I've got some thoughts.
Well, I was going to say, there's two different discussions here. First, whether or not do we think it's true. I don't think there's any way to put weight on this. I'm pretty sure this retailer's been wrong on other stuff before. And I think we were just talking about this an episode or two ago. How many times do we hear every few months, oh, Metroid Prime Trilogy is coming out this year. Oh, it's coming out this year. Oh, this retailer lists it for December 31st, blah, 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 on this year. You're like, who cares? It's something that a retailer will put up maybe to get clicks, or they do it by accident, or, erroneously that information ends up on the internet, or it gets conflated with something else, and it ends up really meaning nothing, and it will mean nothing until there's actually a real announcement. So that's one discussion. Now, whether or not it could happen is another discussion. I do think it could happen. I've seen a lot of people being like, well, they couldn't just shadow drop Metroid Prime Trilogy. I mean, they totally could, so...
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Because that's how I've seen a lot of people look at it. Oh, they can't just drop Metroid Prime Trilogy. People want it for a whole time. What are you talking about? Of course, they could just drop it randomly on June 19th or whatever. Do you think they care as much about Metroid as the fans of Metroid do? Of course they don't. That's why they've treated Metroid the way they have the past decade, right? So of course they don't look at Metroid the way we do. So we as fans might think, oh, if they couldn't drop Metroid Prime Trilogy, that's the holy grail of Metroid games. They clearly don't think that. They just think it's a good game. They'll just drop it, whatever, because it's just a good game to them, clearly. If they thought it was such a holy grail game like we clearly think it is, they would have put the trilogy on the Switch a million years ago. It's free money. It's so easy, but they haven't. So... whether or not it's possible, whether or not I think they'll do it, yeah, 100%. If they announce tomorrow that, oh yeah, Metroid Prime Trilogy is coming out on June 19th, enjoy it, see ya, I would not be shocked at all. I would not be shocked whatsoever if they just did that. It would take no marketing. It would be very, very like them to do that. And they've done it for other Metroid games and for other games. I mean, they're like, oh, new Paper Mario game that's coming out of nowhere, cool. And I bet you a lot more people cared about that trailer. So,
hold on a second. Hold on. They announced Paper Mario a couple months ahead at least. I have a two-part answer here.
But still,
I feel like you're not necessarily wrong. Like this. This would be a dirty move if they just shadow dropped Metroid Prime, because it's almost like you're sending it out to fail, I think. But would it be something that Nintendo would do to Metroid? Maybe. I wouldn't be. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. But at the same time, I just can't believe that they would do that to Metroid Prime Trilogy. And I know that they've done Metroid dirty before.
Why do you not believe that? Like, what makes you think that they wouldn't do that? Because it just doesn't make any sense. Like, the thing about shadow dropping is, like, you can do that if you have a big event where millions of people are watching, like E3 or the Game Awards, and, like, if a bunch of people are watching, but, like, to shadow drop something with a random trailer, it says, like, it's available today, like, that means obviously it's going to be digital only, which I also don't see happening. I believe that this would be a physical cartridge. So, like, I don't see that. Yeah, but why, though? But why? Like, you're just saying, well, I don't see it, but why, though? Like, why don't you see them doing that? Like, that's
why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be a physical cartridge?
Because it would be easier just to release it digitally. You know? It would be easier for them to just release it out of nowhere with no marketing.
To release, like, first-party titles only digitally. That's... You, like, think of it. You could do that... think of all the ports from Wii U over to Switch, or even Xenoblade Chronicles. Like, they could have just released that digitally, but they didn't. It's a physical cartridge with a physical game case.
But that's like a remaster, I just don't see that happening, isn't it? That's like a whole complete HD remake. So? Like, that's a completely different thing. If they were releasing Metroid Prime Trilogy HD Remaster 2000, then yeah, I would see them making a physical cartridge and all this other stuff. But, like, isn't that like just a remaster? So I don't know. I mean, I really think it is very much possible. I'm not sure, like, where people are getting the idea that Nintendo wouldn't do this. So yeah, I don't know.
I just don't see it happening. Like, I can see your point where, like, they've kind of done the shady stuff with Metroid before, but, like, even Samus Returns, which we talked about a little while ago, they even, like, at least they gave that a little bit of promotion, and they released it with a physical cartridge and a physical game case. I don't see them releasing Prime Trilogy only digital unless they launch a full-blown virtual console, which
I don't know.
I think that's the only way I think that this launches on June 19th, is if it's the announcement of a virtual console and it's like you can get Metroid Prime Trilogy as one of your first flagship games. Other than that, I don't see it happening. I don't see them releasing Metroid Prime Trilogy digital only, because then, like I said, why wouldn't you just release all these other games digital?
Yeah, but all those other games are new games or HD remakes. They're not port re-releases. Like,
sure they are.
No, they're
Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze.
Donkey Kong, yeah, okay, that was, but that was a new game. Though.
Super Mario Wii U.
That was a recent game.
Yeah,
those are more recent games. It's a lot easier just to port these older.
But they're still ports, Dak.
I mean,
they're still
I
ports.
Don't know, dude. I don't think, like, those are bigger games to drop digitally. The Metroid Prime games, like, are older, so it's probably a lot easier to drop.
But they didn't drop digitally.
But I'm saying
that's what I'm saying.
The newer, like Donkey Kong, for example, Tropical Freeze, is probably harder to only have digitally. Maybe to have these older games, that Metroid Prime games are older. It's a lot easier to have them only digitally. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
I don't think so.
And and Xenoblade was an HD remaster. That was a new. That's like a. Of course you got.
I just mean you go down the list of how many games from the Wii U that are on the Switch now that are first party games that have had physical releases that have had at least somewhat of a little bit of promotion. As dirty as Nintendo does Metroid, I don't see it happening. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. Like, they've done this kind of shenanigans before, but I just this is gonna have to be one of those ones that, like,
y'all just keep coming back.
I'll have to wait until I see it.
Like, y'all just want to keep getting hurt. I don't know where that expectation is from, like, some people about Nintendo, but they've done Metroid bad in the past, but not this time. Like, why not this time? They've done it every time in the past. Like, I don't know. I mean, you're right. The likelihood of it, like, 100% happening. I mean, I don't know where it'll go either way. I don't necessarily think it's going to be, like, digital only, but I don't really have a stance of whether or not it'll be digitally only or like an only game. But for them to
I just
announce
think
it
like
like a
if it
month
was to
ahead,
announce if it was to go in 3 weeks, it would have to be digital only. There's unless they've
okay,
ramped up
fine,
production,
yeah,
in secret. I don't know. I don't
okay,
think so.
fine, yeah. But like for them to just say, okay, we're just dropping this game, like, and for them to do it out of nowhere and it be for a Metroid game, yeah, I can still see that. If that ends up being the case, where because that ends up being digitally only, I still think that's possible. But yeah, would people expect and do people expect a physical release too? Of course, and I'm sure they probably would do a physical release if they can. So maybe they announce the game 2 months out. Maybe it's not June. Maybe it was intended to be June and it's gonna end up being July or August something. Maybe
Yeah,
there's
I
rumors
could see
like,
them announcing 2 months out for
yeah,
sure, and saying like doing like the Paper Mario thing, like this is coming at the end of August, like here it is, or you know what, even this is coming at the end of July, here it is. But like we need to see that trailer like right away, and we would need, I know that Nintendo, like I said, they've done it dirty, but at least they've given like some notice when a Metroid game comes out. You know what I mean? Even though they didn't give Samus Returns very much, but that's kind of an episode of itself, the whole Samus Returns debacle.
yeah. I mean, we like I said earlier, we got more to talk about. But that being said, they didn't even announce Samus Returns, man. They just showed it on the Treehouse afterward like it was nothing. That was a new game. That wasn't even a port. That was a new. I mean, it was a remake of an old game, but it was still a new game. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't have a
I
lot of
get
faith.
you, but at least like I don't know. At least like we can look at Prime and Echoes and Corruption, and it's like okay, well at least they've marketed this. Like even Federation Force, they marketed ahead of time, right? Like
I don't even
so,
remember if
who
they
knows?
marketed it, but to be honest, I don't even care at this point. Like, you know what? Yeah, Nintendo. If they just said tweeted just a tweet, like, oh yeah, Trilogy's available on your Switch right now digitally, go get it. Like at this point, I don't even care, man. Just let me buy the game and play it on my Switch. Like I don't care.
You know what though? Like this is, I think you have to care though because this is their opportunity to really push that game to new audiences. Like every game, almost every Nintendo series has had its best outing sales wise on the Switch so far, and like I just believe like if you shadow drop Metroid out of nowhere without a big platform like an E3 or something like that, like it's just gonna die, So I don't think it'll happen, but stranger things have happened before in the Metroid universe. That we're gonna follow up on this, but Dak, we got to get going here on Phendrana Drifts. Speaking of Metroid Prime, this is our first ever Mapping Metroid segment, and obviously you played through Metroid Prime last night. I played through it maybe like two-ish weeks ago, and the goal of this Mapping Metroid segment is Dak and I are going to present you with like kind of an analysis and also just our personal memories and stuff, like going through these areas, what rooms we liked, what power-ups we liked, what expansions, etc. We'll talk a little bit about the music, we'll talk a little bit about the bosses, and this is kind of a show format in progress because we do intend on doing these Mapping Metroid segments again. So if there's something that you feel that we skipped over or didn't pay enough attention to, definitely tweet at us, let us know at Omega Metroid Pod. But Dak, let's get kicked off and finally talk about Phendrana Drifts. This has been an episode idea that we've been kicking around for a while, so like it feels good to finally talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I did that Metroid Prime run through, because I wanted to relive some Phendrana Drifts, some Phendrana shorelines and whatnot, get back into the research lab, head through the Chozo Temple and whatnot, and the chapel. And it was cool replaying it in a new way, but it was also just nice to revisit it and get a refresher just before the episode. And my intent was just to play the game just to get to Phendrana, play it a little bit, and see what I can really gather from that experience. End up playing through the whole game; it's totally worth it. But yeah, that's why I ended up playing
too.
it. Yeah, that's why I ended up doing it. But I was very happy to get to Phendrana because it has always been one of my favorite areas in any Metroid game, and I still think it lives up to this day, and it holds up. And I remember it just as fondly as I remember experiencing it for the first time as a kid.
Yeah, 100%. This is one of my favorite areas in Metroid, and I think it's probably the best area to kind of kick us off for this Mapping Metroid series of shows that we plan on doing here. It's a really big area, like lots of interconnecting rooms and just lots of different places to go. But it's also very distinctly broken up into like what seems like more smaller, manageable portions, which I really like. Like, you have the shoreline, you have Phendrana's Edge, and then you have the research facility. And I always liked how like they were all the same, but they were almost like kind of their like subsections of the Phendrana Drifts. But yeah, when I was playing a couple weeks ago, I was on the couch and my fiance was beside me, and like every time. I remember back in November of 2002 playing Metroid Prime for the first time. And the first time that I walked into Phendrana, and you see the shorelines, and like you see the snow falling down, the music is kind of playing, and it's just like, wow, it's breathtaking. And so when I was playing it, I motioned to my fiance, and I'm like, hey, like look at this, like tell me what you think. And she actually put it like really well. She's like, this place looks like a snow globe, which I actually thought was like really apropos. But still, like I've played Metroid Prime, God, I don't know, countless times, and it's just like it truly is like a breathtaking experience every time. The first time that you walk into Phendrana from Magmore Caverns, and I feel like that right there really shows how well this place is like stood up to me, and like 20 years later, you're just like, this is still breathtaking.
Oh, absolutely. And when you get to it in the game, it's paced really well, right? You've gone through Chozo Ruins. You started to really unpack that a little bit of their involvement, and you start to pick up pieces of your initial loadout as a character, and then you've gone through Magmore Caverns. Of course, you're starting to see where the space pirates have kind of started to dig into the planet, and obviously that's a very in your face and overwhelming at times kind of area. And then that's when you finally enter into Phendrana for the first time. And it is very brief, and it's a nice reset.
Yes.
You're once again like everything's kind of like quieter. You're gonna take things in, take a quick breath, and yeah, it really is such a good part of the game, because what Metroid Prime does so well, I think, is that it really lets you just kind of sink your teeth into the area when you immediately get into it. Like everything's very pronounced, like the snow, that's what I think makes it look like a snow globe. Like the snow is it's huge, right? The fog, there's a lot of fog. The rocks, stick out a lot. Like everything's very, just everything sticks out, and it's almost embellished a little bit. And it kind of really adds a little bit to the effect of what they're trying to do. It's very tranquil. It's very ambient.
Yeah, that's
and
a good
ambient's a word that tranquil. Yeah, tranquil, nice word. But ambient's a word that everyone really kind of associates with Metroid Prime, and of course this is one of the most ambient places. This and Talon Overworld as well, but for sure, Phendrana Drifts is really that place you step into and you're like, damn, this is nice, and almost you don't even finish that sentence because you just kind of take everything in.
Like it's almost like a place that you'd want to like hang out. You know what I mean? Like Magmore Caverns, maybe not so much. I would guess maybe here and there in Talon and Chozo, but like
I wouldn't hang out in
this
Magmore.
place is. Oh, yeah, well, I wouldn't hang out in Magmore. I wouldn't hang out in the Phazon Mines either, for that matter.
No.
Yeah, this just has that beauty when you walk in, which I think just strikes me every time that I go. But yeah, so like you said, I mean, and it's kind of nice because you get Phendrana in kind of doses. In my recent playthrough, I was paying a little bit more attention to how many times I entered and exited Phendrana for significant stretches. So there's 4 main parts that you go through. The first one is actually like quite brief. You're only in there for like maybe 10-15 minutes ish. You end up getting the boost ball, and then you leave. But you come back once you've acquired the space jump, and you can get the wave beam, and that's kind of your second playthrough. Your third one is basically the pirate research base, where like you go through that kind of labyrinth, and you end up getting the spider ball, and then like whatever you come back to and collect the artifacts and stuff like that. I love this place, and I wanted to pick out a few rooms in particular just to talk about, Dak. I don't know if you have any rooms too, but one of the things that I love in Phendrana Drifts is like we were talking about a few weeks ago with the Ridley fights. This is the first time that you see Ridley since the beginning of the game, and it's a very quick, very small, but very impactful moment where you're just like, my enemy is out there, and he looks vicious, and that always sticks out to me when I'm thinking of Phendrana Drifts. Is like that's the place where you see Ridley, and you kind of get that like big fight feel, because like that this fight is gonna go down at some point.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I like about Ridley's usage as a character and how he's implemented in Metroid Prime, is that that's how the story kicks off, right? Like you run into Ridley, they're doing this stuff on the Frigate Orpheon, and Ridley takes off to the planet, and you go down there, but Samus gets involved in so much more than that you almost kind of forget about him a little bit until you get back over there. You're like, oh yeah, like this is kind of how that all started. Right. And there's so much more going on now. There's so much more that I've learned about the planet and what's happened here, that that's looming overhead, but at the same time there's a lot more that's now at stake than there was the last time I saw him, and that's something I really like. It gives you kind of like a reflection, right? Like a little moment of reflection there. You're like, okay, like a little bit of a checkpoint, even though you kind of do see him a little. I would say before like the halfway point of the game, and then you don't really see him at all after this. I think that's the last time you see him before the boss fight.
Yeah, I think so.
And I don't even think you see him, immediately when you step into the area. You do, I think, get like the boost ball, or you end up like traversing Phendrana a little bit before you end up, or even in your second go around, when you do end up seeing him. So yeah, it is interspersed here and there, but it is a nice reminder. Like that's how it started off, and that's what, yeah, like you said, what it's all gonna come down to at the end. Like a lot of it was end up coming down to, and of course, I love Ridley's entrance at the end of the game, where like, all right, everything's going good, like we're going in there, and then Ridley's like, psych, dude. Here I come. I'm gonna screw everything up, but we haven't gotten to that point in the game yet. But yeah, I love when you kind of see him. That's one of my favorite points in the story, for sure.
So I kind of picked out a few rooms in particular that I like really enjoyed in Phendrana, and I wanted to just kind of elaborate on them. And you could do the same if you have any rooms as well, Dak.
Mm-hmm.
But one room that always really sticks out to me is the Chozo Ice Temple,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of like it's just to the upper section of like the main shoreline room of Phendrana, and like it's actually got an artifact in it too. But like it's basically this big hall. It's got all these frozen Chozo statues, and like it looks so cool. Like and every time I'm in there, it's just that's one of the strengths of Metroid Prime in general. I think is like, and maybe actually Metroid in general is like it really does a great job of kind of presenting you with this like really lived in, like really believable lore or something along those lines, where like it's just like, wow, like this is obviously a place of like really religious importance and stuff. So I really love that music, and the music actually, or the room, sorry, and the music is just like so the word I put down was agnostic, but I don't know if that's the right word or not, but it just like it reminds me of music that you would hear like at a cathedral, but it's like Metroid-y cathedral music, you know what I mean? And it's like I think that just works so well in that room.
I think it doesn't agnostic mean you don't believe in God, so wouldn't that be like the opposite of the word you're looking for?
Yeah,
Or some
I
kind
think
of
there's a
deity?
word that's kind of like that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But as I was saying it, I was like, oh, I don't think that's right.
Yeah, that's the track that plays in the more like deeper hall areas and temple areas and Chozo ruins as well. And that the word I always thought of when hearing that is melancholy, because when you go through those areas, right, like those are like a people that is very, Samus is very connected to, right, and she's walking essentially among their remains, their ruins, right, even though she wasn't, too far off from being connected to them in a past life, and she's like walking kind of, through where they used to walk, right. She could have been walking there with them if all this stuff hadn't happened, right. Like she could be in this temple alongside other Chozo warriors had, things been different. And kind of looking at like what used to be, which is a lot of what Metroid Prime is, right? It's what used to be here, what had happened, what who had been here, and every time you go through and you see like these great and grandiose and amazing structures and things that have been built and put in place by the Chozo, and they're not there with it, the creators aren't there with their creation, and in a way, the Chozo kind of created who Samus is in a way, and that kind of like disconnect that she has with her creators, yet it still has their image constantly surrounding her all the time. That's what I always get through. Like you always walk through those things, you can't help but like look up a little bit and kind of take in like the high ceilings and these big Chozo statues looking down on you, right?
Yeah, these
and,
impressive statues, and like, I think they just look so cool.
So it is funny you bring up the artifact, because the one statue that is in that area is the one that has the ice pouring out of its mouth, and you melt it with the plasma beam, and that's how you get the artifact. That one I always thought was funny because it just looks like the dude's throwing up. So there's like this dude just like yakking. Like, man, this dude just got caught. He died the way he lived. He was just partying.
He's got an artifact in his belly. You'd feel sick too, man.
Yeah. But I agree. I love that music that plays. I love the Chozo.
Yeah, I always really love that room.
And it really hits a really solid note. And again, one of the biggest things I love about Prime is walking through what used to be, and that's one of those things that Phendrana really does well.
All right, so I want to talk about another. I want to talk about another room here that that I've always been like really kind of in love with, or maybe not in love actually, just impressed by, because it's a very multifaceted room, and that's the ruined courtyard, which is kind of like right outside the entrance to the research facility. It's just like it's a very well structured room because it has like a lot of different stuff. You can pick up an energy tank in there. It makes good use, I think, of the spinner. Like you can kind of power up all the different platforms, and you have X amount of time to get across them before the water like kind of, I can't remember if it rises back up or falls back down, but either way it falls back down and the platforms aren't where you need them to be. But it makes good use of that. So like it's kind of like you do a little bit of puzzling, a little bit of platforming. It makes use of the spider ball. It has like a decent amount of flying troopers in it, so you've got some combat in there too. You've got your save room. You've got your kind of interconnected. Like you can do the big loop around the research facility and come back out, and you fight Thardis basically in that room, or the room to Thardis is connected to that room too. So like it's a very multifaceted room in Phendrana Drifts, and I don't know that I ever appreciated it as much as I did the last playthrough that I had, but I was like, there really is like a lot going on in this room in particular, and I don't know, maybe that's a strange one to kind of pick out because it's not necessarily like visually impressive, but I just wanted to make a note of that.
Yeah, no, this is a room that like I wouldn't. It doesn't stick out to me as a favorite, but I think is iconic just because of the puzzle, maybe so to speak. Um, but it's more of like, okay, you're doing a bunch. Yeah, you're right. There's a bunch of stuff that's happening, right? You got like the puzzle, you got the troopers, you've got three different doorways, going all which way, and this is at least for me a room that reminds me of another room that I actually do like, because at the top you do have the flying pirates, and that's the control tower. And because
Yes.
that's the area that reminds me of this is what the ruined courtyard, the top of it, wants to be so bad, is the control tower, which is a really fun area. You have an artifact that you get there eventually if you go back, but you have this crazy fight, a pretty crazy fight between all these flying pirates, and they're spawning in and coming in from different parts of the map, and the crates are blowing up. They're flying at you and spiraling towards the ground at you. That's always been a favorite of mine too. Ruined Courtyard was always one of those rooms where I was like, why did they build this big like Chozo
Yeah.
bird water thing in this tower? Like, why is this like? Okay, I guess.
I mean, why did the Chozo build anything? To be fair, lots of weird
No,
stuff
yeah,
that they
yeah.
make.
There's like some things that make sense, and other times I'm like, that's weird that they would like build it that way, and oddly convenient for this puzzle I have to do. Yeah, that's one of those rooms for me. Let me think. There.
Like the control tower. I like the control tower, but I hate flying troopers. I don't like them at all. So like the control tower, but it's kind of cool in a sense of like it is at least kind of like, I think of that more as like a flat out dragon knuckle fight with like all these shock troopers that are on jets or whatever, and you're just like, there's missiles flying everywhere. So like I like the kind of intensity of the fight, but at the same time, like I don't like going to the control tower because it's like goddamn, I know that I'm gonna get bombarded with missiles whenever I come up here.
Yeah, well, again, I'm looking also at this kind of at the lens from how I played it last night. It was really fun to fight flying troopers with the mouse and keyboard controls. It made the gunfights a lot more intense, and they're juking and Anya and deking out your missiles and all that. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, that's an area that actually definitely sticks out to me a lot, and is one of the iconic, I think, rooms for like the space pirate area of Phendrana. And overall, I really do like the research facility, specifically one room. I forget the exact room name of it. I think it might be the observatory, but it's the one with
The observatory,
with
that was next on my list.
the holographic projection of the
Yes.
system. I love that room. You have a bunch of pirates there that you get to fight, and there's a bit of platforming, sure, but that's the room that sticks out because it gives you the system that you're part of. And I, at least as a kid, and then growing up later, didn't realize how close Zebes and
Yes.
Talon 4, they're literally right next. Like, you couldn't be closer.
It's like Earth and Mars.
Yeah,
basically.
even closer. I mean, if you look at their orbits, to assume that these orbits are even remotely correct, they're probably not to scale, but like they're very close to each other. And another thing too that they pointed out is Talon 4 is pretty much the only planet that's not a tremendous dump prior to Phazon showing up. All the other planets are the the hologram seems like this planet's a wasteland. This planet has a brain-eating disease. This planet is not that great, but then the space pirates showed up and they dug into it. Now it sucks. Don't go there. Talon 4 was cool, but then this phasing thing, like the system pretty much sucked. But it is interesting how close these two planets are. I always loved this room. There's a bunch of information. It allows you to kind of center yourself in the Metroid universe a little bit. There's a little action, a little platforming. It's a big room. I think obviously the hologram makes it pretty memorable because it's the only kind of big hologram of its size and of information-wise that you really kind of get in the game. So yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite rooms in Phendrana.
I think that the observatory might be the best room in the entire game. Like the like one room, I think that you could put this up against any other room in the game, and it might be the best for all the reasons that you said. And actually, I was watching you play last night, and you were going through the observatory, and I was just like, damn, like this place looks so cool. Like something about like the little solar systems. Like I just think that those look cool. Like no matter what. Like even like the ones that you hang from your ceiling or whatever when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Even those I think look pretty cool. So like this place with its holographic planets just looks so cool. Learning about all the different planets I think is like really really interesting. It kind of you can learn more about the lore of Metroid. Yeah, I mean, seeing how close Zebes and Talon 4, I again when I was playing it a couple weeks ago, I was just like, oh my god, like man, they're neighbors. Like it probably isn't chance that the Chozo picked Talon 4. So I really love that aspect of it. Yeah, there's some cool platforming, and there's like there's a power up in this room too. I want to say it's super missiles as well. So you do get a reward in this room as well. But just like the visual of the planets and the observatory, learning about the planets themselves, they actually give you research data, which I always thought was cool. Just one of the most visually impressive rooms in like really the entire Metroid series. I think I really like this room, and I was hoping that you were going to bring it up when I joined your stream last night. You were in the observatory because I was just like, oh god, this looks like so wicked.
Yeah. And I know before we move on from this room though, because there's something else I want to say about it, and another overall point about what makes this the research lab Aether really good is a lot of these rooms kind of change vibe and change almost like how they feel and how you play through them when the lights go out, right? When you're forced to use the thermal visor. So, and that's, a lot of the rooms change in that way. In this room, it's open, it's almost inviting in a way. You're not really scared about fighting the pirates there. You're learning, there's information, and then the lights go out. The only light is now from the hologram, and it's barely emitting anything. Because everything's so open, you can it's hard to see what the next platform is, to jump to without that thermal visor. And when you do have that feel, a big room becomes suddenly very claustrophobic. And I love that about the research Aether because it gives you that area gives you kind of like a lot more replay value just in that area, because everything changes and how you approach those places changes once the lights go out. So I love that about this room and about the area in general. I just wanted to get that out there before we potentially moved on to another room because I know there's still a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I actually I don't like using the thermal visor as much, but I only don't like using it just because like Phendrana is typically so beautiful that I want to see it as was meant to be seen. But like once you kind of get into like the depths of the research lab, it's pretty much just like your typical space station fare. So by that point, it's pretty cool. But there is something very very, I don't know what the word is, illuminating or inviting, like you said, about the projection of the solar system that it's like a little bit comforting because like I think in that room too there's a save station connected too, so it's almost like this is kind of a respite from all of the battling that you've been doing up until this point, because like to get to the observatory, like you're going through waves and waves of pirates and all these other enemies. So that's a really good point actually about that. But I do appreciate too kind of it's almost like, again, it's like it's a natural light when the lights do go off. So like it still feels a little bit more inviting even when everything's dark and stuff like that. So I really love this room actually. And let's talk about Research Lab Aether just for a quick sec too, just in general. I love that when you get to the point in a Metroid game and it's like this is usually like a little bit into the game, or at least it is in like Super and Metroid Prime and Fusion and stuff like that, where like you first see the actual Metroids. Like you've been fighting all these other enemies for the entire game, but like now you see Metroids. This happens in Aether, and it's just like, wow, like there they are, and you see it for the first time, and you're just like, okay, well, like I'm gonna have to fight these things, and they're in the test tubes, and like I love that moment in a Metroid game. Like it's almost scary, maybe isn't the right word, but like it's just like, okay, now it's on. Now there's Metroids. You know, Pizzus is about to pick up. So I love that about the Research Lab Aether.
Yeah, well, it makes things tangible, you know? Like, you're going into this, like, okay, like, you can kind of see the effects of phase in. You're seeing a little bit of, like, what the space pirates are doing, and now you've gotten into lab. Okay, you're getting a better idea. But, and you've fought, like, a couple bosses here and there, but, you know, it's not, like, anything too crazy. Maybe Flagra seems a little bit over the top, but, you know, for the most part, you know, you kind of, things have haven't really started to take off super hard, but then yeah, you kind of really it finally becomes physical, it becomes tangible. You see the Metroid, and yeah, it's a great experience. The first time you see a Metroid in 3D, and like, and you know, that's awesome, right? Like that was a cool moment when you saw that Metroid for the first time, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that research lab really does a lot of great stuff. Like it introduces you to a lot. That Metroid in 3D, it really gives you your first real taste of the Space Pirates because. You know, again, like you see a little bit of what they've done in Magmore, and if you kind of look a little bit and peek into the the downed frigate area in Talon Overworld, you get those two flying pirates that are hanging out on the beach, and if you go towards them, they'll like look at you, shoot at you, and then they'll fly off, and you'll be like, oh well, I can't wait to face off against that, but you don't have the space jump boots yet, you don't have the gravity suit yet, whatever it is.
Right.
So this is really the first time you get to face off against the space pirates head on. You get to see the Metroids for the first time head on, and in Phendrana as a whole, really things start to kick off a lot because once you come back for that second time, you're getting your super missile, you're getting your wave beam, you're getting this, you're getting that. You're getting a bunch of different stuff that you're able to start really start opening up the game for you. You know, you get your spider ball, a lot of stuff that really starts opening up the rest of the game for you. And this, of course, this run through the research area also gives you the thermal visor too, and that's like your first significant visor upgrade. So that's also a significant deal. So there's a lot that happens in the research area, and a lot you're introduced to, a lot of information. I love the progression of if you go through the scans, you'll see like how the pirates are like, oh, we can totally reverse engineer the Metroids. Like we can figure out how they work. We can somehow get like the energy that they've absorbed and use it for ourselves and have a near limitless supply of energy. We could figure out all this stuff. And then they're like, oh, that's too hard. All right, well, we're just gonna tame them. We're just gonna have a small army of Metroids. We can't figure out how to make our own Metroids or reverse engineer them. We're just gonna tame them. And that's when you're like, oh, that's the mistake everyone made. They try to have this biological army and it never goes right. And then what happens when you shoot out the Metroids with your super missiles and you release them from their tanks? They all instantly go after the space pirates and kill them. And so I always thought that was great because you can just stick the Metroids right on these pirates who just spend scan after scan talking about how great a Metroid army would be and how much better it is just to tame them instead of reverse engineering them or not doing anything with them at all. And that the new age of space pirates and they're gonna ascend and all this stuff. And then the second the Metroids break out, they just attack the pirates immediately, and that's always great to see that. And that happens in the research lab as well.
Just desserts,
Yeah.
as my father would say. All right, last room that I want to talk about before we move on to some other stuff, some lore, some power ups, and some music talk. I want to talk about the Frost Cave over in Phendrana's Edge. There's nothing actually super noteworthy. Actually, I guess like you meet up with Hunter Metroids in here, so that's kind of cool. But I just think the room looks really cool. Actually, like kind of like the crystal caves. I just think it looks really cool. Like you've got the edge music playing, which rocks, and like you can shoot down all these icebergs to break like the ice or to create platforms for you. Nothing like this is another one where I just think like it looks so cool. And Dak, I know you might not agree with me because you're having a hard time in this place last night,
Oh.
but this is one of my. It's just like such a cool looking room. I feel like I'm really kind of a sucker for those like bluey, crystally kind of cave aesthetics, I guess. But yeah, this one always sticks out to me every time I play it.
Yeah, I think I was getting a little frustrated trying to grapple on some stuff here and there just because I'm an idiot. But no, I agree. I love the cave areas in Phendrana, and that's certainly one of them that does it so well. I agree. I love that like the blue, the hard, like deep, thick ice areas, and these like the depths, the caves that you really go in, just you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into the Phendrana area. I absolutely agree. I love, the Phendrana's Edge area myself, and getting through there, the routes that work through that, and how far out you have to go, where it almost feels like you could just like drop into this
It
like
is
bottomless
crazy.
canyon at any time. Yeah, I love that area. No, I'm totally with you there. Maybe I just was having a little difficulty because I was getting tired at one point, man. It was
I
late.
mean, that was like hour 11, right?
Yeah, man. Like that was what I think I
Yeah.
was going for the last artifact in Phendrana, all the way out there. And I was like, oh my god, please end my suffering as I try to try to grapple across this pit so I could get this last artifact in Phendrana. Um, one more room that I want to point out too before we move on from
Yes.
the rooms. I believe it's called the Ruined Hall, but it's the area where you first run into like those two baby she-goths.
Oh yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's
I know what
it's
you're
it's
talking about.
above like the river. That's like across from where you
It's
go
got the
into the
wave
temple.
beam door at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
top.
yeah.
Yeah.
That area, because that's always an area that stuck out to me because it's the place where you're like, oh, I'm going to the temple. It's like, nope, that's actually the ruins area. And that's an area where you run into the Shegoths a little bit, and like there are these kind of like tight corridors. You platform a little bit on the rooftops. I always like that room. And later on, after you take on, I believe, the adult Shegoth and maybe even Thardus at that point, then just like adult Shegoths just start spawning over there too, and you're fighting the big adult versions in these small corridors in this small little tight area. I always like that area. Just for that, it was like this. It almost kind of looks out like not like bombed out, but like it almost looked like this is where like the Chozo might have like lived a little bit. You have these like smaller rooms, maybe.
I was just about to say they look like houses.
Yeah,
almost.
they always took like I always interpret that as maybe being like living areas or like smaller congregating or meeting areas for these Chozo. And once again, like wow, these are like places that people used to like live or worship or Chozo, right? Live and worship and all that. And Samus had that connection to them. And now you're fighting this big Shegoth, and I love fighting the Shegoth. They're one of my favorite enemies, and we'll get to that later. So that's
Right.
one of my like. I certainly like that area. So yeah, Phendrana has so many good areas. It excels so well because you get like the natural, you get like where the Chozo have dug in, and then
Oh
what they left
yeah.
behind, and the whole space pirate. I mean, the map for Phendrana really opens up as you explore it. It really does. It has so much going on. It truly was one of the best areas in Metroid for sure.
This would be like a 4-hour show if we wanted to do justice to all the great rooms in Phendrana. I really, really love Phendrana Drifts.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's so almost every room has like a personality of its own. So, yeah, just to keep it moving here, we'll move on from the actual like individual rooms. But my God, what an area! Let's talk about the power ups and expansions. And actually, Dak. So when I was putting together like what we were going to talk about for Mapping Metroid, I was like, okay, we'll talk about the level impressions, power ups, lore, music, blah blah blah. I actually feel like power ups and expansions are more of a strength of 2D Metroid. I don't know if you agree with that, but just like I feel like in 2D Metroid, you do like there are some expansions that just require crazier things like speed running into shine sparking into tons of different crazy stuff, whereas like I feel like the expansions in Metroid Prime, the trilogy, are a little bit more straightforward. Like they're typically not like too involved, other than like actually finding them or like blowing up something with super missiles. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but for me, like none of the expansions in Phendrana, just like regular missile expansions or anything like that, really stuck out as being too memorable. Like you see a lot of them, but they're behind ice, and like when you come back with your plasma beam, you could just kind of roundhouse and collect them and stuff. But there's not any that truly stuck out to me, with the exception of maybe the one in Research Lab Aether, where like you're on a morph ball, but you have no rails, and you have to roll at the top to get it. I did this in the dark, so it was a real big pain in the butt. But aside from that, I was like, okay, well, like these are all straightforward, and that's not a bad thing. But I think that maybe expansions is more of a hallmark of 2D Metroid. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, for me, for Prime, it's always been about the actual upgrades. So
Yeah,
it's never been really about like, okay, like are these power or like the power ups themselves, the expansions, are they hard to like get or a little challenging or anything like that? I kind of like how it is in Prime. Like it's not super hard. Like it's not a huge focus. Like sometimes they're on the way, sometimes they're just barely out of the way. I like how you're kind of going through a room and not really looking for one, and then you hear that buzzing, the humming that you just can't get out of your head, and you're like, oh, I guess I'm gonna look for one. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's something I've actually really thought about. You might have a point there. You might be right. That's not something that's really ever concerned me in the Prime games. For me,
I don't want to be. I want to make it clear. I'm not saying this is like a critique either. It's just like kind of the difference between like doing some crazy shine sparking running to a bunch of different platforms to get like this obscure power bomb expansion like in Zero Mission versus like just kind of going a little bit out of the way because you hear the buzzing of the items.
Yeah, if anything, it's almost like sometimes you're playing Prime and you go through this, like, you see a part of the map and you're like, oh, look at this path. And then you keep going down. It's a super long path. Like, wow, something must be really good down this long path I'm walking. And then it ends up just being like a missile upgrade. And you're like, oh, God. Like, oh, my God,
Yep.
That does suck. But, yeah, because most of the time when you are getting, like, a power or, like, an upgrade for in Prime, it's not because it was hard. It's because it was, like, out of the way or it was like kind of long to get to, right? And then when it ends up being not like a real upgrade, it's not an armor upgrade, it's not a new weapon, it ends up being just like an energy tank or a missile expansion or whatever it is, you're kind of like, that kind of sucks. So yeah, I see what you're saying there. It definitely really is never something that I've thought about too much, and it doesn't really detract from the experience for me. And at times, I almost kind of like, not having to really like, not necessarily not having to work too hard, but like I don't have to go on some crazy super hard mission to just get an expansion.
Yeah, I agree, actually. I agree.
I like that it's like, okay, like I can go for it. I don't have to. Or if I do go for it, it's not going to be like a test of will. It might just be a little out of the way, where I can really kind of...
I'm just thinking of those ones in like Samus Returns where you have to do the morph ball like cannon shot or whatever, and I'm like, good God.
Yeah.
Like these ones are nicer.
I think
sure.
One of what Prime does really well is it always has two kinds of those situations where you have like a room you've gone through that you clearly can't get to it and you almost forget about it, and then when you go back to that room later you're like, oh yeah, I can get this now. And it's not really that hard, but it's like, oh, this wasn't even possible and I kind of forgot about it. And in other situations where it almost challenges you to try and get it, but you don't have to go like super hard, and like waste a ton of time. I don't know. But yeah, I think you might have a point there. For me, it's always been about the upgrades though, and I think Phendrana excels. There's so many cool upgrades.
I'm going to run them down here, actually.
Yeah.
So you've got the boost ball. You've got the wave beam, which you get after fighting Sheegoth. You've got the super missile, which you get after, kind of working your way through the research facility and getting to the observatory. You've got the thermal visor, which I believe you get at the base of the research facility. You've got the spider ball, which you get after fighting Thardus. Mm-hmm. And then finally, in Phendrana's Edge, you get the gravity suit. So, like, there is a ton of pertinent power-ups that you need in Phendrana. It's actually like I'm looking at this has got to be the most like power-ups in any area in the game.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, this is the area. I mean, you go for the boost ball and you leave, you come back later, and then all of a sudden you're getting the wave beam, you're getting the super missile, you're getting the thermal visor, you're getting the spider ball, this that, and it opens up so much more of the game. I think this is when you go back to Phendrana for the second time and you really start digging into it.
The second time, you pretty much get everything.
But that's like when I think the game really starts taking off a lot, because at that point you have all like your basic upgrades. You got your morph ball, you have your morph ball bomb, you have your boost ball, you have your various suit, you have your missiles, you have your charge beam. You have like the basic stuff, the stuff that you pretty much started with like at the beginning of the game, right? Like maybe since minus like the boost ball, pretty much everything you had in the first mission of the game. Now you're getting all the cool stuff. You're getting a new beam. You're getting upgrade missiles. You're getting a new visor. You're getting a new morph ball. You're getting new stuff. And that's what I like about Phendrana. You're getting all the new stuff. You're getting all the cool toys. And the wave beam is like, oh, this is dope. Like your arm cannon gets like flat and thick. And you're like, oh, yeah, this is sick. I love the thermal visor and how you get it. There's so much. Like you go into the lab, the pirates drop down on you. And you're like, oh, Jesus. And it's like right there for the taking to steal that. I love the spider ball, and I can't wait to talk about Thardus. It's one of my favorite bosses in the game. And I love the spider ball, how it ends up, you use it a lot in the game, and, opens up the game a lot more. It looks really cool. It makes your morph ball look sick as hell. Phendrana kills it. Almost goes over the top, like, with how many cool upgrades you have and the amount, like the volume, the density at which you have them.
And I guess that's kind of a reflection of like there's really only 5 main areas in Prime that you go to. So like of course there's going to be a lot of stuff, but man, it really does seem like Phendrana is packed with upgrades. Let's talk about lore a little bit and kind of interesting tidbits of like the game's story that you can find in Phendrana. Stuff that sticks out to you. You mentioned earlier about how the pirates try to like reverse engineer the Metroids. I wrote that down on my list too. Actually, I always loved that. Where like they're just like, we can figure it out by God, and like
Yeah.
you just see them going absolutely nowhere. I actually think it's kind of funny. Like it's one of those like weird moments of like twisted levity in Metroid.
Yeah, well, the space pirates have always kind of had this bit of a comical edge to them, where like they're like, we're gonna take over the world, and it's like again, only like cartoon evil geniuses say that, so it almost kind of has like cartoony feel to it. Like the space pirates are like kind of naive in a way, like how they approach.
What are we doing tomorrow? The same thing we do every night, Mother Brain.
Yeah, it's just funny. Like that's what I was saying earlier. How they're like, oh, we can totally reverse engineer the Metroid. Duh. Like who hasn't done this before? And then like you go to like the very next computer, and then the very next scan is like, so it turns out that doing that is really hard. So screw that. We're just gonna have an army, right? Like it's just funny how like the progression of you see the whole progression of their research in the Aether area. Like gives you like start to finish, like they showed up, what they're doing there, what they tried, it didn't work. Okay, screw it, we're just gonna do this. I love how it goes into, it just really gives a bit of character to the pirates. It makes them a little kind of naive in a way, but at the same time, like with the contrast of like they're pretty vicious, and I don't know what it is, but I don't remember this from playing as a kid, and maybe it's just from the version I played. Maybe it's the trilogy versus the original version. But the pirates in the Phendrana area, especially in the Aether area, aggroed the hell out of me all the time. They were constantly like rushing faster than I ever thought I got rushed as a kid by these pirates. Like aggressively, fighting to keep their research to themselves. And I always thought that was a funny contrast to like how their scans play out, how they think like, oh, this is a new generation of the space pirates. We're going to take over the galaxy with these Metroids, like blah, blah, blah. And like there are these actually pretty vicious looking aliens, but like contrasted by like their like evil genius, like mustache twirling plans in their scans. It was always funny to me.
Here's another, actually, it's just like such a little thing, but it's the little things I think that I appreciate the most and that make the most sense. I love that there is a reason for having this research facility in Phendrana Drifts. Mm-hmm. I think like it's one simple, I can't remember, it's a pirate data somewhere, but it's just like, we built this facility in Phendrana Drifts because Metroids are more susceptible to the cold, and they can be controlled easier in the cold, and it makes them docile. I love that stuff, man. Like, it makes so much sense. Fun. Like, it's just like, yeah, like, wow, like what attention to detail, or like what, I think that we were talking on the Zelda show a couple weeks ago about how sometimes you can just have these like big temples in like a random place and it doesn't feel like it belongs there. Mm-hmm. Just like with that one simple line, it's like they just made total sense of why this research facility was here. And actually, so I was actually wondering too. So the Chozo used to live on Talon 4. Mm-hmm. I wonder if perhaps like the Chozo actually, maybe had a hand in setting up this research facility, because we know that they created the Metroids, but we're kind of assuming that it's the other faction on SR388 that did that. But I thought that was kind of interesting to ponder, perhaps.
I think there is now, from what we know more about the Chozo, that there's a possibility that like maybe some Chozo that we hear might have been involved. But what is like? Do we really know like the true crossover of like the Chozo and the pirates being here in the facility? And I could be wrong here, but it seemed like the Chozo were like, they had this planet, it got infected. The Chozo were obviously like super affected by this. Like their civilization was practically like destroyed by this like corruption, essentially, on the civilization on this planet. That is, they realized the power was so great, the corruption was so crazy, they had to seal it away and lock it away. It still did irreversible damage to the Chozo on that planet. Then the pirates showed up and were like, "Oh, look at this! Like we can totally mess with this." I don't really think there was much crossover, if at any at all, with like the Chozo that lived on there and the pirates that showed up later. But if I
don't really think so either.
But if there was, yeah, I think there could have been a possibility. That would be interesting. Maybe there was like a single Chozo who was like working with the pirates. Maybe I don't think there's anything in the maybe like that would be a retcon thing, or like something that was added in later. Now that we know kind of more about the Chozo from Samus Returns, well, like at least the intent of this game, it doesn't seem like that was ever.
It presents them as very spiritual, like naturistic Chozo versus kind of the scientists of SR388. But I was like, man, that could be kind of cool if like there's like a rogue faction in Talon 4 that's making this, and maybe the Hunters just kind of found this old research facility and augmented it. This is just kind of stuff that I was making up in my own head as I was playing through, and I can't remember.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Keep going.
I can't remember when I thought this, like maybe a couple years ago or something like that. But I was like, this is pretty cool. Like, this could be cool if they wanted to go this route.
Yeah.
Unlikely, definitely. But I was like, okay, I could get behind that.
Yeah. Well, what struck me was interesting that you bring this up. Replaying the game, we were talking about like our back on the Chozo episode. What we think of like our images of the Chozo prior to Samus Returns, right? And a lot of it is shaped from Metroid Prime. And going back through the scans and how the game plays, that still like was really re-solidified in my mind. Like the Chozo are how I remember them in Prime, but I don't remember how like almost like religious zealots. Like the space pirates almost come off as like Covenant in this game in their scans at times. When you read like why like their like thirst for power and like ascending and all like the word choice they use is not like what you think. Like when you think of the space pirates a lot in Metroid, they're alien pirates, but they're still pretty science based. They might be a bit naive, but they're not stupid, right? Like they're clearly formidable in a way, right? And they seem to be rooted in like the physical, like the science they can achieve and the physical power that they have, right? And well, in a lot of these scans, and especially in the research lab Aether, the pirates talk a lot about like ascending and a new
a new dawn of the age of space pirates,
that kind of wording, and that took me back when I read it because I didn't remember a lot of that stuff, and it's like that's weird how that was kind of written because it doesn't seem to really have shaped the identity of the space pirates overall, and doesn't seem to be referenced much in later games, or much at least from what I can remember. It doesn't stick out a lot to me because it contrasts so much of what we know about them and what they do. They don't have their own temples, right? Like we don't see them having any kind of like worship or like any deity they look to or anything like that. So to have that kind of like spiritual religious kind of like wording and like perspective that they have in their scans at times was like weird to look at because like that's like it doesn't seem like that would be said by them. If there was a Chozo crossover,
it could be interesting to like explore that.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
More, for
like,
sure,
what if there was a Chozo among the space pirates? Like that would make me think, oh, maybe that's where that came from. If
maybe it could be Dark Chozo from. Is that what we called him from our Chozo episode? Dark Chozo.
I think that's what you're calling him. I was
something like that. The evil Chozo.
I doubt it would be any kind of Chozo
cool
influence,
stuff.
but it is interesting that like how those scans. I like going through the scans and like they reveal a lot, but at times also make you think like, that's interesting. You wouldn't expect that.
All right, so we are going super long here, but we're gonna finish it out. By God, we've been talking for an hour about Phendrana Drifts and somehow have not touched on its iconic music. I think that you could make the argument that Phendrana Drifts is maybe the best track in the Metroid series. I think
has a case.
I think I could make that argument. It very much depends because it's a very serene track. And of course, I'm talking about the main Phendrana Drifts track that plays when you're in the shorelines. There's a lot of really... Like, when I think of Metroid music, a lot of it is like the iconic tunes that you hear in Super Metroid that are kind of been remixed over and over again. But, like, I think that when you heard Phendrana Drifts, it was like instantly in that same category where like it was instantly an upper tier like track in the Metroid series. And like I think a lot of music, like you look at like Fusion, Other M, Corruption, Echoes, even a lot of that has really great music, but it's never reached like the same level of like love, I guess is the right word, that the tracks from Super Metroid have reached, or like iconic status. And I feel like Phendrana Drifts like really did, and like really right away. Maybe it's not the best track in the Metroid series, but like I think it's in the conversation for sure. And like I think it's the best track in Metroid Prime, like the trilogy. I think I could say that for sure. But I really love this track. I listen to it often, just when I got some music going on, if I'm doing some work on the computer or whatever. And I also want to give a shout out to Phendrana's Edge, which is actually I think the low key most underrated song in Metroid. It's a banger. This thing slaps. It's so good. And especially when you were playing last night and it was like this slowed down version, I was just like, I was ready to get my strobe lights out. I was ready to go and get a beer from the fridge. I was like, this is awesome. But yeah, I love Phendrana's Edge. That track just like pumps me up and makes me want to go and like, I don't know, work out or something. But it's awesome, and it's funny because like they're such different tracks. Like one is very peaceful and serene and beautiful, and then the other one's just this techno banger, and like both of them are awesome, but both of them feel very much at home in the same area.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head who composed that song or the OST in general, but whoever did for Metroid Prime, like they're geniuses. These are masterstroke songs. So Metroid Prime does so well is that like it has those ambient like tones, but it still also retains that like the electric like sci-fi kind of vibe that Metroid has. And yeah, the depth song, the Edge theme where it's a bit of a banger. It has all that like electric dance-ness to it while incorporating like a remixed like glacial kind of icy feel
It's
from
awesome.
the deck. It's
Oh,
so well done. And I love it because it's like both songs and the first song as well, they really make you want to explore. You know, like when you first step into the world and like it opens up and like you have this like these fading tones that like are swelling as you open up, and these strings that play and these faint like harmonic kind of voices that kind of like just like I don't know, surround you almost. It's very like visceral, right? And it makes you almost feel like you're at like a top of a mountain in like SSX, right? And you're about to like just shred the biggest glacier of your entire like life, right? Like you're just like about to really explore hard, and so much of the world feels so open to you. I love that about the main Phendrana theme. And then when you get deeper into Phendrana, you're going into the caves and this thick ice and deeper and deeper, and you know the vibe gets a little like, you know, the engines start revving a little more and the vibe picks up a little bit, and you're like, oh, like now we're cooking with gas. And it kind of like fills you a little bit of electricity. They really, I mean, they hit the nail on the head with these tracks. They really did. And then when you get to those Chozo temple areas, you know, they bring in again those like the melancholy of like the discoveries you've made after you've made these
it's kind of like the
moves, you know.
yeah, it's like that music you hear in the Chozo ruins, but like it's got the prime kind of like crystally instrument or whatever that they use to signify like a snow level. That track is called the Ice Chapel, and that's actually another like really great, really serene track. And that was the one that I was describing earlier, actually,
Yeah.
In the Hall of the Chozo, which like it's really really great, but it's still got that like Phendrana like twinge to it almost, you know.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree. There's so many tracks. I mean, Metroid Prime competes with itself with like best tracks in the whole franchise. And Phendrana like
Yeah, I would agree with that.
carrying the team in
Yeah.
a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think the Phendrana is probably the winner for me. Like it stands out, but like yeah, the Talon Overworld I think is really great.
100%.
The Frigate is really great.
Oh,
there's a lot of like really awesome
dude,
music
the down
here, but
frigate. That when you said like this is the best track in the game, that's the track I thought of immediately. The down frigate theme, that piano, man. I mean that when you talk about somber and melancholy, I know we're talking about Phendrana right now, but really quickly, that area is so good when you get to revisit the frigate after you've gone through that. You've already seen that area, that music playing. Oh, it's so good. I absolutely
all right,
love it.
we'll get there.
We'll talk
get
about
there.
that one day.
Well,
but yes,
I'm sure Talon will be on Mapping Metroid.
I
in
think
the
Talon
future.
and
Probably
Phendrana are the
not too
two
distant
best
future.
areas in Metroid Prime, I think. So I'm glad we started off with this one. I can't wait to talk about Talon. But yeah, Phendrana really kills it with its music.
I'd probably agree with that. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about some of the enemies and the bosses here. I just had a few quick notes that I wanted to go over. And I'm going to start off. You were talking about, oh god, I can't even remember what the room is called with all the houses. But
Oh,
when you get
the
there,
ruined hall or whatever it is. I think it's called
Yes.
the ruined hall or access to ruined hall.
so you fight the baby she-goths in there, and man, I feel like horrible every time that I shoot a baby she-goth because
Oh,
it's
yeah?
like, first of all, this thing's called baby, so like it's just newborn and it's attacking Samus, and like I'm just like, oh, I'm so sorry, but I have to shoot you in the mouth. So
It's
I
a bit
always
gra-
feel
it's a
really
bit
bad
graphic.
destroying them.
You know, because like you burst open
Yeah.
their back and you get this. They see like the exposed flesh and all that, and they also look like
Oh.
xenomorphs. You know, like they have like a xenomorph face, like almost identical to a xenomorph. Like they have like the no eyes and like the flesh like stretched over the skull, and
I think since we did like the Paper Metroid episode 2 where I was pitching like the cowardly she-goth,
Yes.
even more so, I was just like, I don't want to hurt you.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think about that. I think they're one of the best enemies in the game. I think they're the first time because they kind of incorporate a bunch of previous enemy like traits that you see earlier in the game. They kind of remind me of beetles, right? Where you got to attack them from behind, but at the same time they can shoot at you from afar. and they can also charge you too. So they start like really kind of changing up on you a little bit there, and they also always come in pairs. You know, the baby Sheegoth too. So I like that. I think they're definitely one of the best designed enemies in the game, and I think when you run into them in the game, they're the best enemy at the time. They really incorporated things you've seen in the previous enemies and work together. They look really cool, and yeah, they even have it's a little grotesque almost a little bit. You know, you're like, oh come on, man, don't make me fight you, man. Like let me just get by. You know, let me just get by. There were a couple times I was playing, I would just jump past them. I was like, don't make me fight you guys. I don't want to do it. But then they make me do it, and they pay the price. But I agree, I love they're so iconic too, right? Like I don't think an enemy reminds you so much of like its area as like Sheegoths do, in a lot of Metroid games.
I could. Well, I guess like the Magmors and Magmor cabins.
Yeah.
Or actually, I always forget that those are called
They are
Magmors.
called Magmors.
Ironically
Yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like I actually don't disagree with that. Like you see a Sheegoth, it's like, oh, Phendrana Drifts. And actually, let's talk about the big Sheegoth here for a quick sec. I think that this is one of the more tough boss battles in the game, actually, which is kind of surprising because I don't think Metroid Prime is like super challenging in its boss battles, or I don't know, maybe it's not to me now, maybe it was when I first played it, but Sheegoth is one of them that I was just like, okay, like this dude, he puts up a good fight. He's a hardy guy. I guess I was a little bit surprised by the Sheegoth when I was playing in my last playthrough by how much maybe I just underestimated him, but yeah, he put up a good fight.
No, I agree. That's definitely one of my favorite fights in the game, and it's one of my favorite areas. And after you fight them too, all the other adult Sheegoths start showing up in the area, so that's cool. I always like that about Phendrana.
But they're never as big.
They are never as big. That is true. What I thought was interesting about this is how it's like set up, right? Like Samus goes in, it's in a Chozo temple-ish area, right? And then like, oh nope, sorry, you got to actually face off against these Sheegoths, and you fight off. You face the two baby Sheegoths first, and you're like, okay, this isn't so bad. Like I've done this before. Like I'm ready for this. And you take them on for a little bit, but then the big adult Sheegoth comes in, and the room is big enough where it doesn't seem like too big, but it is kind of like scary to look at a little bit. Those big like bright 6 eyes, where the babies don't have like any at all. It has the spray breath, which is a lot larger. I think the baby Sheegoths have it too, potentially. I don't know. Actually, I think they only have the snowball shot, but these have these big like dragon like electric breath or whatever, and the huge like electricity, ice spikes on its back. It's a cool boss fight. It's something. It's a fun fight, and it's a cool area to fight it in. So yeah, I like this fight. It's definitely one of my favorites in the game.
So I touched on Metroids and Hunter Metroids earlier, so I won't go over them too much now. But other than to say, like, I love that they show up in here, and like I said, it's always great the first time you see a Metroid, especially your first time seeing a 3D Metroid. But I want to give a shout out to an enemy that is a huge piss off for me, and that is the Jezlap. I think I said that right.
Jelzap?
This Jelzap. Okay, yeah.
Jelzap.
So this dude lives in the water. He looks like one of the squids from Super Mario, and he has like this little ball of energy in the middle of him, and like he makes your visor go static whenever you're by him, until you finally get rid of him. I hate this thing. He's so annoying, especially before you get the gravity suit, because like
really?
Not only he distorts your visor, but he'll lock himself up or like make himself invulnerable to weapon fire, and it's like, ugh. I just wanted to give this little fella a special shout out on our show, just to let him know how much I hate him.
It's really funny you're saying that, and what I'm about to say, because I think it really comes down to how you play the game, right? If you have Metroid Prime's like very slow and limited controls, that enemy is mad annoying. But with the freedom of like the mouse and keyboard control stuff, this was one of the easiest enemies in the game to deal with. You easily just one-shot them because they show you their mouth immediately. You just snipe them from afar, or you just literally just jump around them, right? Like they never move pretty much. Like they're mostly stationary. So that's actually funny that you brought this up, because I was like, really? Like these guys are almost no problem, and it's like it almost changed your perspective on how you approach the game.
Yeah, but like 99% of people aren't playing with the mouse and
100%.
keyboard.
Yeah, that was interesting you brought them up, because it really does change how you approach the game. That being said, yes, these things are annoying because they always seem to show up on like the most narrow of paths, especially in those underwater like root areas, you know. And like, oh, I can
Ugh.
just walk over this. Nope, there's actually a gel zap just waiting around. And yeah, the static thing that electric-based enemies do, so annoying. And that's one of them. So yeah, the gel zap, and not my most annoying enemy. I hated those robot like enemies that made your.
Oh, the ones that lock the doors
Oh my
until you defeat
god,
them.
I hate those things with a passion because they like they're.
I think that those are everywhere though, right? Those aren't just native to Phendrana.
No, yeah, I think they're in like the space pirate areas. So like you see them in Phase and Mines a bunch.
Yeah. Okay,
But that was like that's what.
yeah, they're terrible.
I hate those so much. Gel zaps, yes, also annoying. For Phendrana, I'm trying to think. The most annoying enemy for me, for Phendrana, I'm trying to think. I will say that to touch base on the Sheegoths, what does annoy me is that when you come back and you have the plasma beam, that you can't just melt them. You still have to shoot them from behind. You know, I'm like, all right, I should be able to absolutely melt you right now, my guy, but I can't for whatever reason. That always stuck out to me. But yeah, no, the gel zap is that's a funny choice. Those are annoying to deal with. I'll give you that.
I can't remember what in particular it was, but I remember I just like I stopped playing. I put my controller down. I got my phone in my hands. I was like, I hate gel zaps. I hate these guys. So yeah, I had to give a shout out to them. Let's talk about the big bad guy of Phendrana Drifts, Thardus.
Oh, yes.
I always thought that this boss, I think he looks cooler than he actually fights. I think that this is a really great, like, he's a cool looking boss. It's a fun fight. You make good use of your thermal visor. He's really easy though, and it I don't know. I really like when he actually like rolls up and like it's really close and it's really like it feels like kind of a brawl. But a lot of the times he's just kind of standing around and waiting for you to shoot him. But I do actually really love this fight. I love how like basically it's like this like wicked looking collection of rocks. Not my favorite boss in the game, but I have a fun time every time I walk into this fight.
This is actually one of my favorite bosses in the game. Thardus is very up there with me. I really like this fight. It's kind of like a silly setup. Like you just jump into this big arena and a bunch of rocks come like to like throw hands with you. But it sticks out for me for that reason. I like the moving weak spot that you eventually have to deal with. You know, kind of in a way with the Omega and like Elite Pirates later. But you have like the moving weak point. You have like the fog come in. Makes it kind of hard to see. You have like you got to boost away with the boost ball a little bit here and there. And I like this fight. I liked it playing it in Metroid Prime. I think it's a lot easier when you just lock on and stuff. When I played it last night, I didn't lock on or anything. I was just fighting him and shooting him like with the mouse and keyboard and stuff, and that was really fun. It was a really kind of almost a tough fight in that way. I also love Thardus. Like he almost does a bit like when he starts powering up, he does like the Goku like and, like charges up and like electricity flies into the air and stuff. Like he freaks out and starts like going ham on you. I like this boss. He has a lot of character to him. He looks funny. He's like you scan him. It's like these rocks just are angry rocks, and they came together and they are angry and sentient. And I was like, yeah, whatever. You know it's a video game. I always like that. I like this boss a lot actually. Yeah, it's like the hardest boss. You know, I made it a little more difficult based on like how I played it last night. No, it's not. And yeah, overall, are all the Metroid Prime like bosses that difficult? No, you have to turn the difficulty up yourself. Make it play on hard mode or do whatever it is you do. But that being said, I like this boss. I like the setup. I like the area. I love like the stages a little bit. Becomes kind of like a bit of a staged fight there. And it's an interesting concept. I like this fight. It's one of my favorites in the game.
I think the best thing I can say about it is like he looks really cool, and at the end of the day, that's all I really need out of a Metroid Prime boss is like a cool looking boss that delivers kind of a big fight spectacle, and that's what this fight is. Not my favorite, like I said. I think like Omega Pirate and Metroid Prime and like even Ridley, I think those fights are a little bit better. But I mean, really, that's how your game should go. Is like all the best fights are kind of towards the end. So I like that fight. I do kind of agree with you. It's kind of funny how like there's just this big battle arena that's ready to go. It's like, what's this doing here? But I like it. Let's move on and talk about our last thing really quickly.
Oh, before we move on from this, I just wanted to say another one of the things I love about this is at the end. If you remember from the beginning of the fight, Samus sees like a rock float into the air, and then like it's like, oh, what's going on? And then like Thordis forms behind her, and she turns over. She's like, oh. At the end of the fight, after you beat him, all the rocks fall to the ground, whatever, and that one single rock that she first saw like hits her in the back of the head and like falls to the ground. She's like, oh, what the hell, man? I always like that moment. Anyway, but yeah, that's another great Metroid Prime does so many good
Even
things.
in defeat, he's throwing
Exactly.
stones.
I like Thardis. Underrated Metroid character. Bring him back. I'd see meta
All right,
Thardis.
let's finish this up, Dak, and get on out here. Let's talk about something that's specific to the Metroid Prime areas, and let's talk about artifacts. We've kind of talked about the two rooms beforehand in the control tower, where you need to get the artifact by collapsing one of the towers and morph balling into that to get the artifact. And we talked about it in the Chozo Hall, where you melt the ice. I like those artifacts are actually pretty easy and pretty like, not much really to say about them. But the last artifact, man, God, I had a hell of a time playing it. This was the Artifact of Spirit, and you get it right in Phendrana's Edge. This one, I was like, oh my God, where the hell is this thing? Like, because you're looking for it, and what you need to do is use your X-ray visor to see which wall you need to power bomb. But like, when you have your X-ray visor on, you can't see the door behind the actual wall itself. It's actually like, it's a huge pain to get to. And eventually I got it. But I just thought that I wanted to point that out. The other thing I think of note about Phendrana is like the three artifacts is like, and I was watching Dak play this last night when he was collecting artifacts. So like, this is again fresh on my mind. It's like, man, they could not be further apart in Phendrana. Like one of them is in like the absolute depths of the research facility. The other one's in like the shoreline on the very entrance to Phendrana, and then the last one's on like Phendrana's edge, which is, I mean, as the name says, literally the edge of the map. So like, I always think that that's like hilarious, especially if you're a player that pretty much like what you did last night or what I did a couple weeks ago, like just kind of forgot to get the artifacts as they were going, and then came back and got them. Like it takes forever.
Yeah, it's Phendrana is an area where you definitely want to keep the artifacts in mind, because this is my only gripe with Phendrana, is for some reason it's only accessible from Magmor Caverns. So you can't get there from Chozo Ruins, you can't get there from Town Overworld. That makes it like such a headache, because if you forget anything in Phendrana, it takes you like just a day and a half to get all the way back there. And then you're right, it's spread out all the way through like the three major areas of Phendrana. So it's certainly like you want to keep those artifacts in mind and not forget about them as you move through the area, because you can get them with pretty easily. Actually, I think you might have to use the
I think the only one you can get is the control tower right away. The other ones you need the plasma.
Yeah, you're right.
For.
Okay, yeah. So that's even another thing, is that you kind of almost have to. You're almost forced to do that, but you can avoid at least having to go for the. But actually, no, because you need to almost go through the control tower area anyway to get to the Phendrana's edge.
Yeah.
You almost kind of screwed either way. You're right. Yeah, that's definitely annoying. The fact that you can only get there from Magmor kind of makes that backtracking a little tedious. Especially if you're doing it in one playthrough that's lasting into the wee hours of the night. Maybe if you're setting up your, like a normal person, your sessions maybe over the course of a day or two, it's not that big of a deal. But
Dak, I wasn't even watching, or like I was watching, I wasn't even playing, and I had only been there for like an hour, and I was like, oh my God, this is painful. I can't imagine what that was like for you.
It's again, this solidified Metroid Prime as being like my favorite Metroid game, and might be my favorite game of all time, single player wise and whatever. It was rewarding. Like when I finally got that last artifact after going through all Phendrana, and then getting the last one, Phase of Minds, like it was such a relief. I was like, oh, like I did it, like finally, and sometimes maybe not.
Phendrana's Edge was painful though. That was a painful room. You should clip that.
Oh yeah, well I'm gonna save that VOD and maybe do highlights, and I want to go back and play the game in hard mode and do like a montage, like a pretending it's like a Call of Duty montage, but it's Metroid Prime. I want to do that. But I love traversing Phendrana, especially with the FPS. You really get to appreciate the game so much more when you can freely look and move. And Phendrana especially, there's so much detail in the textures and the air, and some of the textures, not all of them. Some of them are not that great, but and the area and just the love kind of put into the structure, and like it made it feel like it was lived in and dug into, and it felt so much more like alive. Like and that's another thing before we move on from this episode almost, is something that Prime does so well, is that even though like these places aren't like inhabited by like a civilization or like whatever it is, the places still feel alive, right? Like when you enter Phendrana, like the snow's falling, those I forget what they're called, but like those supersonic like birds flying around, right? Like the water's moving. Like I love that about Metroid Prime. Like you might not have like a town of villagers and all that stuff, but it still feels alive and lived in or being lived in by something. And I always loved that about Phendrana too, and something that really stuck with me. And when you enter that area and it's just like, wow, this place is very serene. I would 100% hang out here for sure.
Yeah, I mean, to bring it all the way back to the very beginning, like it's just, it's when you walk in, it just hits you. And like, I think that, you know, even when I was, God, I don't even know how old I was in 2002, but I wasn't very old. But like, you can, the first time that you walk into Phendrana and you see the snow and you hear the music, you can just tell, like, I knew, I was like, this is gonna be something special. And I think that it like actually truly is one of the best areas in Metroid. And like, you know, there are some iconic areas like Brinstar, Norfair, like all these like classic areas, but I think you could put Phendrana up there beside any of them.
Agreed. 100%.
But yeah, that's gonna do it for this episode. We've went really long here, Dak, but I think that we gave Phendrana the attention that it deserved. And you know, we're gonna make this a semi-regular segment on the show where, like, you know, maybe every 6 weeks or so we'll pick a new area to map and we'll talk about it, we'll play through it, we'll talk about the enemies, bosses, we'll talk about the music, we'll talk about the lore, we'll talk about the expansions, level impressions, all of that stuff. If there's anything else that you think we missed, let us know at Omega Metroid Pod. But we're finally at the end, and Dak, it's probably about time that we get out of here.
I think so,
of course, we want to remind all you guys where you can check out Omega Metroid Podcast. You can check us out on Podbean and iTunes and Spotify at Omega Metroid Pod. Like and subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review. That would be so cool. Tell a Metroid fan in your life where they can get their Metroid fix. That would be awesome. And of course, follow us over on Twitter at Omega Metroid Pod. You can check me out on Twitter at Spiteri316, and you can check Dak out on Twitter and on Twitch at the Rapture _.
Yeah,
if you want to chat with us.
I was gonna say we're gonna do some more streams. I'm gonna be streaming Prime 2 and 3.
Yes.
Absolutely, we'll be streaming Prime 2 and 3 once I catch up on my sleep. Maybe I'll be able to figure out how to play Hunters with the mouse and keyboard. That would be absolutely huge. But yeah, I'm gonna be playing some more Metroid.
Maybe it would be good if you could. Heyo, that's gonna do it for us. We're debating Hunters next week, so come back and get in on that war. Until then, guys, thank you for listening and take care.